Hello everyone, welcome back to Star Wars Loose Cannon. My name is Chris Higgins, and today I'm joined again by the Brothers Krynn, Dan and Joe. They are here to do the part 4 of the Kenobi Timeline. Dan and Joe, thanks again for joining. How you guys doing?
I'm good. I'm good as well. Kenobi Timeline Part 4 of... I have no idea how many parts. This is stretching on for too long. I'm joking. I hope we're not boring people. Always a danger with these things. By that I mean like fan fiction and whatnot. Okay, so last time we left off, we dealt with Order 66 and we slaughtered most of our cast of characters. Which, you know what? That's good. I feel good about that. A little murder in the evening, it, helps your back, helps me sleep at night, and I bet Chris feels better because, supper doesn't taste the same without a bit of Jedi genocide.
No, and you gotta, there's a lot of loose ends that you needed to tie off, so.
Yeah, so we've got, for one thing, alright, so we gotta start, we're gonna actually go, not with Tahlon Kenobi first this time, because he's got a big storyline, and I kind of want to save him for last of the cast of characters, because his is the best story. Save the best for last. So we're going to start with probably the least interesting. Okay, so actually let's start with the Twi'lek senator. She goes back home, and, well, she's already back home, and fighting for her planet of Rencloth, and she's quick to discover that the Empire kind of wants to dominate the space sector. Naturally, the Twi'leks can't do a darn thing, so she has to flee into hiding. So that's one character. We're setting her aside for a bit because not much interesting happens with her. Because, she might be wealthy enough. She might have her bodyguard who's a Wookiee, and she might have a Mandalorian bodyguard who's tied in with the Wookiee, but those three aren't able to do much other than scrap and scrape to survive, which makes sense under the circumstances, because this is the rise of Darth Vader. Nobody is really able to stand up to Vader, except maybe Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, but he's not around right now. I had to throw that reference in because I love Tim Allen.
I mean, if he was the only one who could defeat the Chosen One.
Then you've got, let's see. Now, we do have to get into Malira. Her twins, because she had twin kids, are over on Tatooine. And the thing is, their dad soon leaves the planet he's on and goes to, where Malira died. Because she died in the midst of Order 66 in a former Sith temple. And the thing is, and actually, let me just quickly... What planet did I say it was? Let's see. I've got it around here somewhere. I know it was not Korriban. Let me see. It's because our oldest brother was the one who decided. Dromund Kaas. That's right, it was that planet from Tor. Because our oldest brother wanted to tie it in a little with the ancient Sith, because Dromund Kaas is, according to him, supposed to be connected to the ancient Sith lords, because it's right there in a neighboring system to Korriban. So that's where Malira would have met her end. So, in a Sith temple there. So, okay. That storyline, So, Valerian Val has to basically sneak off planet with the former Padawans, but his plan is mostly to find out what's going on and then get to his kids, because, kids kind of come before everything else. But he does want to try to help out Malira's two former Padawan learners, Jilia and, of course, Skyrim. Now they're accompanied by their Keldor friend and Darren Paul, and who is no less surprised than they got to dodge around clones, because that's some serious business right there. The clones are abiding by Order 66 and do know how to kill them. That being said, Valerian tries to help out Darial, the Trandoshan Jedi Master, once taught Melira, but Darial's kind of spiritually crushed. What we're thinking with him is that just as Obi-Wan and Yoda were kind of broken, along with other Jedi, like Echu and others, most of the Jedi turned off their lightsabers and just stopped being Jedi. They were too spiritually broken to really continue being Jedi, so they stopped. We were thinking that's what happens with Darial. He flees into the shadows, to the planet of Trandosha, and just remaining and hiding there for a time. Not having the spiritual, emotional capacity to carry on. And he brings with him, of course, what mementos he can of his former Padawan. Skyrim carries off her lightsabers, and Jillia and Skyrim, though, are soon hunted down after they begin investigating along with Valerian. But Valerian soon leaves because, once he's made sure that the two are in hiding, but they've been tracked down by Ordnum, the former, the guy who, in one of the previous sessions, kind of ended up a little overstrained and broken by, the effects of the war and losing loved ones and whatnot. I don't know if you remember him, but the thing is, we were thinking that he was stationed over on Coruscant for a time because Yoda deemed him unfit for battle. It's just he has PTSD and he's going a little crazy. So let's keep him on Coruscant and let's try to give him some therapy. The dude needs it. But Jedi Knight Ordnum has a terrible temper. But this is where we want to get into a bit of the lore of something that Palpatine was up to. Now, the Jedi Knight series sees in the backstory, Palpatine captured Jarek and a number of other Jedi and break them and turn them to the dark side. Ordnum was turned as well. He was one of those group of Jedi Palpatine had his eye on and caught and turned. Now, this does not necessarily mean he intends to make him an apprentice. It just means I need a flunky. And it's now that we're going to unveil Ordnum's given name, Tyrannon. So, of course, there was always, he was always destined to go dark. To go Darth, I should say. So Tyrannon tracks down the two Padawans and wants to make a kill because he ended up dispatched to Dromund Kaas, found the corpse, but could not locate the other corpses. And the thing is, Palpatine just sent him out there because he knows Tyrannon once worked with them, and this is his test as a Sith. And the thing is, he did not find the corpses of the Padawan, so tracks them down, along with Darren Paul. A battle ensues, and this is where we were thinking Tyrannon is cast into the sea on one planet and defeated. And he is humiliated and, for a brief time, devoured by a whale, because there's always a bigger fish. But he carves his way out and would eventually make his way back to shore, but this would fuel his hatred. So we now have the thread of someone that once worked with Melira now being of the dark side. And he has vowed, of course, vengeance against Skyrim for defeating him, as well as the other two who were accompanying him. Now, naturally, this is a great accomplishment for these Padawans, but they now decide they need to flee into the shadows. Now, they don't know who Vader is. They only know that the Republic has become the Empire, and, you don't want to be around when, Now, they think Tyrannon's dead. They flee to the Outer Rim. So they're running to the Outer Rim. There are two Padawans and a security guard who's injured. So, and what people forget is during the last of the Jedi books, and a few other, and I think the Rise of Darth Vader novel, it introduces the idea that in the first few months of the Empire, things are a little chaotic. So this is still happening within the opening weeks. So the two Padawans flee. They're trying to find Val. They don't have they didn't find him. But they do, however, end up deciding to go to Millennia, who was a friend of Melira's. So, they go to her planet and find their way to her, and that's where we're going to leave those characters for a time. Val, for his part, goes back to Tatooine, picks up his kids, and basically he decides he wants to leave because, well, not long thereafter, after his arrival, he is forced to stay for a brief time because the children's grandfather is reluctant to give them away because he's been raising them for a year and a half, almost 2 years. But the old man is killed in a Tusken raid while Val had gone off to the bar to sulk, because it's the thing to do. And Val comes back only to find the place raided by Tuskens. Thankfully, his kids were hidden by their cousin, who was a vivacious young Force-sensitive girl, but he's not going to train her. The 3 kids are basically going to be taken by Val to another, well, basically to hide in the shadows over on, well, this is where I think we were going to tie, right, we tied this in with the planet of, I believe, Andoran, where, because of the young girl Olivia, who had been queen of Andoran, had been restored to her throne partway through the Clone Wars, thanks to Malira and her friends. So Val goes there, because, you know, there's connections there. So he takes the kids there, and that's where they're going to stay for a bit. The idea being, you know, best to hide the kids and hide out of sight. And the kids then spend a portion of their childhood basically just in a royal palace hidden from sight. So, but they're not going to stay there for very long, because why would we leave them there? So that's the Padawan, and that's the Malira Stardust thing. Like, that's... Okay, so we've closed out the Stardust thing for the moment, for the immediate aftermath of Episode 3. Now, I hope this all makes sense. I'm not trying to be too meta or Mary Sue-ish. The characters are not looking to defy, they're basically hiding and flicking off the lightsabers. Because you flick on lightsaber, you're dead. That was our rule with these characters. They're dead meat if they flick it on. Now, as for the Fergus Feld, that plot thread. Fergus is dead, if people will care to remember. His Padawan ended up basically separated from him during the battle. And he would basically... We were actually kind of modeling him after Echu. So he basically disappears from sight on the planet he's on and basically disappears amongst historic ruins and isn't seen. And everybody assumes he's dead because they found a charred corpse because he was supposed to have been charred in a factory that went boom. In reality, he was cornered, cut his way down into the sewers, and because why not do the Spider-Man thing, and he fled. And he's lived amongst ruins without it, basically flicking off his lightsaber and staying out of sight for the next... Let me think. With that character, I think it was like, what, 16 years before we even use it? No, we use him again, and a few years later, then it's basically he's like in the background for like 10 years. It's not that we don't like Fergus's apprentice, it's just, you know, you gotta wait till the OT to use him. There's a lot of characters like that. Then you have, oh right, Fergus's sister, the one who was a former dancing girl, because she married a clone. With her, if everyone will recall, she basically froze some of his sperm. And she ended up deciding not long thereafter, well, around the time of Episode 3, she decided to unfreeze it. So now she's pregnant. And she gives birth, but that plot thread is kind of tied in with Tahlon, so now we have to touch on, I guess, Tahlon. I think have I rounded everyone up? I think I have.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, Mikran. Right, I forgot about Mikran. How could I forget about her? Mikran had the 339th Legion. Right. With them, this is where we got semi into, I think, Mary Sue's levels. But Mikran ended up at the mercy of this clone legion that has a strong discomfort with Order 66 because they were separated for so long, for almost a quarter of the war. They're they kind of assimilated into an Outer Rim style lifestyle. So, and their loyalty gene is a little defective because they've been forced to survive and become indies. So, our psychology there was the order is received. Hale instinctively says, yes, okay, we'll do it. But then when it comes time to actually deliver the order, he is the only clone in the galaxy who hesitates, ponders, and then proceeds to contact his troops and tell them, the upper command has been jeopardized. And he basically tells his troops, they've been jeopardized. Senior, he basically decides to default onto an earlier command structure where the Jedi are at the top, pre-change of the orders. So he makes the personal decision not to kill Jedi Knight Mikran. Now, in that regard, the 339th are now basically going rogue as a legion. And we had originally planned that when we'd be writing these chapters, there might be a title for each character. Then it was going to be the Rogue Legion. And we just thought that sounded cool. You have Rogue Squadron, Rogue Legion would be pretty cool. But the 339th are basically out on the Outer Rim. They are a large battalion, and they decide to basically shut down their Republic transponder codes, and so they're no longer kind of registering as Republic ships. And Mikran is informed of the orders they have, and this is where we're thinking she, on the other hand, senses Melira's death, is traumatized, and she initially instinctively does the stupid thing of trying to head back to Coruscant. The clones don't want her to, so they imprison her briefly, even as they go off to live the life of pirates, because they don't have much other choices than piracy. And there they'll remain in the shadows on the edge of the galaxy, on the extreme Outer Rim, further almost than the Hutts, which is pretty far. Mikran will escape and decides, I'm going to Coruscant to investigate things. But along the way, she's captured by a Sith cult that cooperates with Palpatine, and she temporarily, I shouldn't spoil, she is turned to the dark side. But her breaking free and her being captured, now she's going to be their prisoner for about 2-3 years, and then she breaks. And at that point, she turns, and she does end up going off on her own. She does not join the Sith cult, but she is a Dark Jedi. And the thing is, Palpatine did not really hunt down Dark Jedi. Why hunt them? They'll inevitably come to your side. So Mikran is kind of broken under the trauma of Order 66. And this is where we wanted to show that this is a very traumatic event for the Jedi. There's nothing quite like this. And you're dealing with a war trauma, and Mikran is genuinely a gentle person. Someone whom she doesn't, there's no point of reference. And she's a school teacher. I think Librarian of Seleno did a funny thing where he said, if you go into education, you can marry a pretty young mid. That's pretty much Mikran. She's just some school marm, basically. She's like a blonde-haired Jean Grey, basically. But, she turns and takes on a darker turn for a bit, because psychologically she reached her snapping point. Okay. Now, as for Tahlon, I believe I've gone for everyone, so now for my favorite. Tahlon has to, smuggled Mace Windu off of Coruscant to Korrilag, and by the time Anakin is heading back into, Coruscant after he decided to go lava surfing without a surfboard, courtesy of, which was Obi-Wan's idea. There, that's good. That's well worded, right?
Yeah.
I hope that was politically correct. I'm joking here.
It's a problem, Bill, because if you fall down, you don't really get another chance.
Yeah. Anakin found out the hard way.
Yeah.
Sadly. Actually, it's a bigger pain in some of the video games. Because, like, oh man, like, I've actually I've game overed a few times in Jedi Academy because you try to run for the lava. It just doesn't work. You're supposed to jump from rock to rock and whatnot. Anyways, who am I to try to teach the Chosen One? Tahlon, we were thinking, slips into the temple while Palpatine and Anakin are distracted. He gets the idea to come back to Coruscant because the problem with Tahlon is his innate curiosity. He cannot resist being curious. He wants to know what happened in the Jedi Temple. And he's warned against this by Talanis, the Mandalorian, who has to stay behind because Talon slipped off without her noticing. She has to stay with Mace because somebody has to protect him. Talon slips back onto Coruscant, but this is where he makes a mistake. He's actually spotted, and this is where we're thinking there were some Mandalorian mercenaries, because there were a few, who worked for the Republic. And a few of them never took to Talon. And we were thinking some of Tarkin's, because Tarkin is the prefect of Coruscant. He manages a lot of the administration. We were thinking there was at least one guy who informed Tarkin, and Tarkin then decided to inform those Mandalorian mercenaries and some of the, and basically the clones. And so when Talon slips into the Jedi Temple, sees those recordings, slips out, but on the way off Coruscant, you have people trying to basically kill him. So he goofed. This was stupid of him. So of course Talon's slipping off Coruscant, and this is about the time that Fergus's sister, she finds out also that Talon was back on planet because she's over not the airport, but she's pretty much trying to leave the planet as well. And so Talon is trying to take public transportation. The reason he wants to take public transportation is to lose himself in the crowd. This is an old Jedi trick. And so he slips aboard a public transport without getting spotted this time. But the thing is, Tarkin's men do know that he's on board one of the public transports. So this is where they decide to send some guys on ahead to Korlag, or wherever, which is where the ship is bound for, to wait for him. Now, the problem is, some of these guys notice Fergus's sister instead. And being familiar with the fact that she has a history with a few of the clones, they decide to tail her. So Talon has kind of caused himself some trouble and some trouble for a friend. This was a very stupid thing he did, and he's quite rightly reprimanded and told how stupid he is by Talanis when he gets back. And so Talon has to grab the still hidden Mace Windu, still not exactly in great condition Mace Windu, and get him off the planet now. So this has turned into a royal disaster. Now, this is where Talon does manage to do this, slipping off to the planet of Keegan, which is a Jedi apprentice planet. Now, he does this, but here's the thing. He doesn't realize that Quinn's, his former Republic commando guy, Widow, is now being tailed by the Empire. So, Talon doesn't realize that. She's still trying to track him down, and she is kind of off base on this one. Realizing she's being tailed, she tries to slip off to just some other planet, and they still manage to tail her. And this is where we were going to show she's kind of resourceful in that she does lose them briefly, tricking them into thinking she's heading for Naboo when in reality she decides to head for Onderon, where Onderon is still in the grips of some conflict because, they were on the front line to an extent against the CIS. They're over in the mid-rim. Onderon is a very important Jedi planet. It used to be a bit of a Sith planet in that Freedon Nad founded the Royal Line. He was the most powerful Force sensitive of his generation. But Freedon Nad, his ghost would later help corrupt Exar Kun, and kind of help cause some trouble for Ulic Droma. But Freedon Nad had a tomb on Duxon, and Freedon Nad's lineage once they were freed of the Sith influence, became allies of the Jedi. And they did send a lot of their family members off to the Jedi Temple. And they were kind of the Skywalkers before the Skywalkers. This is where this woman slips onto Onderon, because she tricked them into thinking she went on one public transport, she went on the other. But not knowing where she was going. But she gets into some trouble, and this is where we're thinking the response from these mercenaries is to decide to put out a public notice for her arrest. So that way, they get civilian aid in tracking her down. And she is quickly spotted, fingered out, and this is where Tahlon sees the news and, realizing to an extent of what he's done, decides, I gotta go help out again. But this is where he's starting to realize, okay, I keep screwing this up with this woman. I gotta track her down. So he goes off to Onderon, and this time he's a lot more careful. And now Keegan is also on the mid-rim. So you've got 2 mid-rim planets, so it's not the furthest journey for him. But the thing is, it's during this time that this, by now heavily pregnant woman, ends up fleeing onto public transport again. It doesn't work out. So she tries to steal a starfighter, kind of succeeds, but almost crashes it until it's basically captured in a stasis beam. So the Empire intend to capture her, but this is where we're thinking Tahlon kind of comes to the rescue, and in his own starfighter, and kind of puts a bit of a target on his head. But this is where ultimately she ends up forced to crash land on a planet, and because she jettisoned from the ship in an escape pod, that goes well. But the thing is, she is injured, and Tahlon does track her down, although he has to abandon his own ship, which is shot down. So we were basically thinking they crash land on a still war-torn planet between CIS forces and rebel forces, I should say, and Imperial. Tahlon does track her down, but by then she's going into labor. And the idea was she does give birth. And the thing is...
Bless you.
Thank you. The thing is, we're thinking Tahlon basically helps cut the baby loose, and the mother lives long enough to give the girl a name that's born, because this is a daughter, not a son. Most clone children in Star Wars are sons. We decide to flip it on its head and make it a girl. And so the mother names the daughter. But Tahlon is kind of, Tahlon and her are found by some of the local clones.
Something might be wrong with our connection.
Tahlon is confronted by his former clone buddies, Zuko and Nate. What the hell? All right, I'm back. We're back.
All right.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm hearing you now.
All right. Well, the idea is Nate and Zuko, the former Alpha Squad members, are there to confront him. And you have the Mandos who track Tahlon down, and Talon's in an uncomfortable position. And so, he's on the cusp of being utterly, utterly screwed when we're thinking the mother's still kind of alive. And of course, it's at this point that Talanis rolls into the rescue on board her own starfighter, shooting down and killing several of the Mandos and causing some chaos. Talon's kind of torn and is tempted to take the child along. And this is where we're thinking Nate tells him, "Give us the child." The clones do know her and recognize her, that she's their sister-in-law, and take the attitude, she's ours, give her to us. And Talon's told to get on the ship, and Tahlon has a split second to decide, and the mother basically begs him to, the mother kind of takes the side of more of the clones with her last breaths, but does beg Tahlon to protect her child. So Tahlon, a little heartbroken and stunned, and realizing he can't really protect a child, gives the baby over to the clones. And so Nate and Zuko take in this little girl, whom is a clone daughter. And Tahlon then basically flees, and the clones just give him a 5-second head start before they start firing on him. And they do start firing. And so Tahlon escapes, and when they flee back to Keegan, it's to meet up with Mace, who is not happy and proceeds to probably give him a little crap. And especially when it's like, you abandon the child, which this is where Tahlon had a moment of insight when he did give the child over, that they were not going to kill the kid. Now, the name chosen, we were thinking was, now we made up the idea that this is what it means in Mandalorian, but the name we chose was Viera, which we were thinking in Mandalorian would mean flower, because the mother thought she was as, it was a name that the father had chosen, Quinn's. If a daughter, he wanted to name it after a flower on Mandalore. What do you think of that idea?
I like it.
Okay. Well, the idea, though, is that this girl's not going to be like Boba Fett. She's not Fett, but she's going to be raised by these clones in the utmost secrecy. And so we have a bit of a clone child here, a child of the Legions. And she's basically hidden. Now, if anyone says, how could the clones ever hide anything from, like, Vader and whatnot? Vader never really went into the barracks. None of the Imperial officials really cared what the clones were getting up to. They paid them very little mind. They were utterly disinterested in them. They just assumed they can follow our orders and do whatever we want. The clones knew full well that Anakin was Vader. They knew full well a lot of things. They just never talked about it because there's no one to talk to. And, like, we got to bear in mind, they have nothing but scorn for Palpatine's favorite toy, as they put in Battlefront 2. So, like, these guys, nobody's paying attention to. They could have kept Luke Skywalker hidden within their barracks, and nobody would ever think of searching there. No one would even consider it. And I know people might say that's hyperbolic, but not really. Like, no one actually goes into the barracks. And the few times they do, it's like not into the individual bed chambers of the clones. It's just to basically say, all right, ladies, let's roll out. And that's the thing. The Jedi, if you were to tell me the clones could keep a secret from the Jedi, I'd be very surprised. Like, the orders notwithstanding. Like, because the clones and the Jedi hung out a lot in the barracks and outside the barracks. But the Sith took no interest. These are just their puppets. So, yeah. This is setting the stage for the Dark Times. Now, we were thinking, would temporarily go into the shadows, armed with the knowledge he has, but he's going into the shadows more with the goal of trying to recover. Now, naturally, he's not the sort of man to want to get a prosthetic, but he's going to need time to get back in shape and recover. We were thinking he goes to Harun Kal, his homeworld, which he's always had a strong connection with. So he's on Harun Kal, and don't worry, he's not going to be perfect, and saving the day and whatnot. We cannot contradict the events of episode 4, 5, and 6. Or any other canonical games and comics and whatnot. We cannot. So in that regard, the stage is set, and we have, of course, Tahlon, who is going to try to he basically just turns into an outlaw. But he and the Mandalorian Talanis get the idea to maybe broadcast the recording of Anakin. But that doesn't go over well, because they don't actually succeed. But this does attract the attention of Darth Vader when they do try to do this in the core on Corelite, having slipped back onto the planet. And the idea is, this time they're hunted by Jarek, whom Talon's able to give the slip from, and Talanis was able to fend off very briefly, and they flee once more. Vader takes an interest in them. Now, what we're thinking is Tahlon and Talanis end up on a ship and are hit by the Empire and crash land, fleeing to the Outer Rim, but crash land on Geonosis, at which point they now have to deal with the Geonosians. And this is where we're thinking they start to by now they've started to develop a bit of a friendship. But now the friendship's starting to change. And from there, they end up basically falling in love. And they find several broken remains of starfighters, and over the course of several months have to patch something together to jump over to Tatooine, which is nearby, and very near, actually, if you look at this galactic map. And this is where Tahlon ends up with Talanis in Anchorhead, which is the Kotor city. Because I believe there's 3 cities on Tatooine: Mos Eisley, Mos Espa, and Anchorhead by the time of the movies. So Talon's now in Anchorhead with Talanis, and the thing is, this is where we were thinking he does end up happening upon the trail of a certain someone, another Kenobi. And we were thinking he does discover Luke, but his view on the matter is one of, well, he doesn't want to tell anyone, and he's not going to tell anyone. But his attitude towards Obi-Wan is one of, now, Talon's riding high on the idea of, we do have to rally the Jedi cults, we do have to rebel, we have to fight against the Empire, we cannot stop fighting. Obi-Wan has the attitude, we should hide and give up the fight. We need to wait till Luke comes of age. 2 very different stratagems. 2 very different men. So they fight. Not like physically, but they squabble over things. And what we're thinking is, they basically split. Talon goes off on his own, and Ben just shrugs his shoulders and goes back to the desert to mope. While Tahlon and Talanis will lead a tumultuous life for the next few years, they do end up having to hide because, we were thinking at this point Talanis gives birth to a son, and Tahlon, in complete defiance of Ben, names his son Qui-Gon. So we now have a Qui-Gon Kenobi that's born. And this is where we're thinking Tahlon consults with Mace, and the thing is, Mace advises action, but waiting. But not as long as Obi-Wan would. Like, Mace is kind of taking a middle path, but wanting to give a surgical strike to the Empire. This is Mace's way, after all. He prefers a decisive strike that could win it in one great battle. Tahlon, however, will end up in a spot of trouble, because he ends up falling into a trap, and this is where we want to give Jarek some credit. Jarek and Tyrannon organize a trap, and this is where we're thinking Tahlon is caught, and this is where, by now, it would be about 3-4 years after Episode 3. And so Tahlon has a 2-year-old son, and has, let me think, Qui-Gon's about 2 years younger than Luke, so that's, because we calculated by Luke's age, because he's the main character. So we have Qui-Gon 2 years younger than Luke Skywalker, and we have, that would be 4, Luke's 4 years old. Yeah, so it's about around that time. Yeah, it's around that time that Ferris Olin happens, so we have the last of the Jedi novels. But we're thinking that Tahlon was caught, Ferris Olin comes to the rescue, breaking through in a planned execution of Tahlon, and Ferris teams up with Talanis to do this. And so the 2 of them end up coordinating a rescue operation. Ferris Olin, this would be about 3 years after Episode 3, not 2. My bad. With the timeline. No, wait, it's 4 years. Let me see. Yeah, it'd be about 5 years, actually, because I just remembered. It's about a year with that asteroid temple and whatnot. Yeah. Because Ferris Olin had the idea to start after, because he was Anakin's rival growing up. Ferris Olin, though, was a Republic trooper in the Clone Wars. But then afterwards, he started a rebellion against the Empire almost immediately after the Empire was established, and managed to hold out for like 2-3 years. Then his friend Rowan got into trouble, and Obi-Wan came to the rescue. Obi-Wan, though, would decide to return to Tatooine, leaving Ferris to basically rally the Jedi and inspire hope in the galaxy. Yes, he did abandon Ferris, to an extent. Ferris was bitter for a short time, but then got over it. Ferris is the only Jedi to succeed in the Imperial period to break into the Jedi Temple after Episode 3 and the initial months of chaos. He briefly turned to the dark side for a short time and learned some Sith techniques from Palpatine. He also, interestingly, converted those techniques into Jedi techniques and used them to even fend off Vader at one point. He's a badass. He's Star Wars Odysseus, basically. And this is where we're thinking, where Ferris would decide to bring Tahlon to his temple. Now, Tahlon, on the other hand, would recognize the guy who's a traitor reporting for Vader, because there's a guy who helps destroy this temple, this hidden temple that Ferris was building. So we're thinking Tahlon spots the guy because Tahlon fought on the Outer Rim in the Clone Wars. Ferris did not fight alongside this guy. Tahlon did, and Tahlon knows he's an informant for Vader because he also investigated and whatnot a lot of different figures throughout throughout the war. This guy fought on I forget his name, but he fought on the side of the CIS, but was an agent of the Republic. He was an inside man, a turncoat. So Tahlon recognizes him, spots him, and the guy goes to escape, but is killed in the escape by Talanis. Talanis gets scolded, but nobody's going to do anything about it. But this is where we're setting up for Ferris's hidden temple to remain hidden. But it's not like it's going to have 1,000 Jedi. But Ferris basically decides to house Tahlon for a time, and Tahlon and Talanis basically live there for a brief time. Vader's still active and very angry, but it's at this point that we're thinking Ferris heads out on another of his missions. He recruits Jaren Muln, he recruits Solus, he finds Adrioto's son, who's Force sensitive. They're brought to the Hidden Temple. There's a few others. We were thinking there'd be Darial Farron, who'd be found by him, with the aid of Tahlon, of course. And the thing is, it'd be not long thereafter that Tahlon and Talanis would be spotted. Now, the trouble is, this is where we're thinking they do slip into the shadows, but there's a Sith cult that goes on to hunt them down, and we were thinking Tahlon, by this point, is kind of concerned because, he's got a lot on his plate, because, how do I put it? I'm just thinking in terms of age. Tahlon is allied with Ferris and is the only Jedi of Ferris's agents and Jedi that are still heading out into the galaxy. But Tahlon ends up kind of deciding that, okay, so these Sith cultists are hunting me, and his wife is pregnant again, so he gets the bright idea of trying to, basically, he decides, I'm going to become the hunter. He slips onto their flagship, because I was thinking, their base, they do have a capital ship by this point, gifted to them by Palpatine, and he basically takes them down. But then the ship is assailed by Vader, and Vader is finally caught up with his former friend. And Tahlon then is faced with either the option of fighting or escaping. Now, he decides to take the jump to hyperspace, starting to head for, of course, Hiron Cal, where Mace is hidden. But the thing is, then he realizes Vader's on the ship, and the ship ends up arriving in the space system and taken out of hyperspace a little prematurely. Of course, Tahlon then decides, crap, Vader's on board the ship. Sensing him, he decides to flee to the escape pods. And it's at this point that his wife, who's pregnant, is force pushed into one of the escape pods, and the escape pod is launched onto Hiron Cal. No, wait, not Hiron Cal. A nearby planet, which we were thinking would be a city planet. And, it's at this point that Tahlon chucks his eldest son onto another one, because in this case, the two, he reacted when he should have been a little more level-headed. And he is confronted by Vader, and Vader ends up pretty much approaching him with, usual Vader flair and going, "At last we meet again." And shoving his son into the escape pod, Tahlon doesn't immediately activate it as Vader pounces, and so a heated lightsaber duel starts, with Tahlon basically trying to fend off Darth Vader, struggling, and on the other hand, Vader's not really ever fought anyone with a double-sided lightsaber on Talon's skill level, since he's been put in the suit. So they're kind of in a weird, awkward position in terms of who might win. And Tahlon tries initially at one point when Vader proposes turning Qui-Gon to the dark side. Tahlon gets angry, flares up with the dark side, starts beating him back, and then that exhausts him, and Tahlon then falls back onto the light and starts harnessing that power that was always greater than the dark side, and starts gaining the upper hand after initially losing the upper hand. But this is where we were thinking, as the duel progresses, is kind of having an internal battle, because he's reaching out with the Force and trying to subdue Vader. And the two are exchanging taunts, because Vader, partway through the duel, Tahlon does call him Anakin several times, informing him in this manner, "Yes, I know who you are." And the thing is, Tahlon is internally divided because he still loves Anakin. And to kill Vader would be to trap Anakin within Vader. It would be to condemn Anakin, that little boy that Tahlon grew up with, to hell. Literal hell, because the dark side of the Force, of the netherworld of the Force, is basically supposed to be hell in the Christian sense. This is where the spirits of the Dark Lords go. And to condemn Anakin to that doesn't sit well with Tahlon. And, Vader does throw taunts like, "You are weak, and I have surpassed you." You were always meant to be beneath me. Well, not beneath me, but you were always meant to be number 2. Second place and second rate and all. But we're thinking Tahlon does something that, we were going to give him this much. He's able to sense as the duel is progressing, thanks to his own knack for sensing that he inherited from his mother, that Vader is, there's still good in him. And we were going to give this one to Tahlon, but the realization stuns and kind of leaves Tahlon uncertain, and Tahlon then has to confront the fact, can I kill my best friend? And he decides, no. And so, what he does is, by this time, he uses the Force and jettisons the escape pod, even as he flicks off his lightsaber. And Vader strikes him dead. The body does not disappear, though. The body is still there. And so Vader runs him through. And with his last breaths, Tahlon forgives Anakin. And this is how we were thinking Obi-Wan's son dies. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's awesome. So does he get revenge on Obi-Wan in that way?
Vader? Yeah, we were thinking that would be a vengeance of his. But we were thinking, one of the last things Tahlon sees is, we were going to rely on a bit of Korean history drama logic here, or even Japanese drama, because Lucas always gave nods to them. And we were thinking just, not the perfect bloom, but it's him and Anakin at the start swore they would see all the stars together. And, where he's like, we did see a lot of them. They're still so magnificent. Where he just tells Anakin, we saw so many of them, Anakin. If only we could have seen more of them. Or something to that effect. And where Vader's not affected. Vader's like, the hell's he talking? Oh, you're right. Our little oath when we were kids. Criff him. I don't care. But the Anakin in Vader is kind of strongly affected because he's like, I just killed my baby brother. So we were kind of thinking, like Tahlon kind of, even as because they did have a kind of force bond, but we were thinking Anakin did sense Tahlon forgave him. And where Tahlon had the choice of trying to kill Vader. But the challenge, whether or not he could have succeeded, people could decide for themselves. But the idea is, if he did succeed, Tahlon felt he would lose, because he'd lose his best friend. And even if Anakin had turned into Darth Vader, this was still the boy he grew up with. He couldn't kill Annie. So we were kind of thinking, and now we have to reveal, Tahlon is kind of also inspired by Kidster from Episode 1. So we were kind of thinking, like Kidster, he grew up looking up to Anakin. So Kidster would never be able to kill Annie. So we thought the same thing with Tahlon. He can never do it. So now, his sons, because the second child that's born is a son, Talon's sons grow up without a father. Because Tahlon chose Anakin. Now, this is not to condemn him for doing this choice, for making this choice. It's just that Tahlon felt that he couldn't condemn an innocent, what he thought, maybe not an innocent, but like a good person to help. And this is something that we were thinking Ben sensed. Obi-Wan does sense it. And Obi-Wan kind of blames Tahlon. He's like, why was he so stupid? He shouldn't have, this was his own damn fault. But this is where we're thinking, we got to bear in mind, Qui-Gon Jinn's spirit stops visiting Obi-Wan in the actual Dark Times period, eventually. He stops visiting him. And this is where we're thinking Qui-Gon starts to stop following him around and stop visiting him. Because much as Qui-Gon has passed down the Shaman of the Wields technique to him and Yoda, it was with the idea you would use it to guide people. But you wouldn't, the thing is, we got to bear in mind, Qui-Gon never wanted Obi-Wan to become the sort of person who would turn people away and say another pathetic life form. He loved Obi-Wan. And now, Ben has basically, this is a wound through, a sword in his heart. But, Obi-Wan kind of blames his son as well. So Qui-Gon kind of takes offense at this. So we're thinking this is when Qui-Gon starts to stop visiting him. But Qui-Gon's spirit, in turn, starts to look after his great-grandson, who's named after him. Because the idea was Talon still worshipped and revered Qui-Gon Jinn above all others. And so he wanted to honor his grandfather by naming his son after him. And what I was thinking, though, is that Talanis, the Mandalorian, does receive inspiration for a name, one name that Tahlon had decided upon for the second son. And the second son would be named after Dooku's rival, who fell from grace, did all sorts of evil things, and then tried to atone for it. And so Talon's second son is called Lorian Kenobi, a man who tried to achieve redemption, helped build Spaceport 88, and thus one of the main trafficking lanes for the galaxy, and bettered the galaxy on a macro level, enormously. But then died, alone, staring at a couple of rocks, and basically killed horribly. So we were thinking, Tahlon had been part of the mission as a kid. I believe we mentioned this before, but I don't know if we did. But him and Kairos ended up dealing with Della Luna in Junction 5, where Lorian's from. So Tahlon had met him, and the man had made an impression on him. But it's his story of redemption that inspired Tahlon to want to name his son after him. And so Talanis decides to honor her husband's wishes. So you now have one child named after Qui-Gon Jinn, the other after a figure who achieved redemption in similar fashion as Anakin. I don't know what you think of that idea in terms of themes with these two kids and the names.
Yeah, I'm not sure I followed that last part again.
All right. Lorian was a rival of Count Dooku when they were Jedi apprentices. Lorian was rejected from the Jedi Order for reaching the age of 13 and for breaking some of the rules. Dooku broke rules too and tried to murder Lorian. But Dooku got a pass, Lorian did not. Lorian became a space pirate and a murderer, and then Lorian became a politician, and he went down a wrong path. And then, in his old age, after he served his time in prison, he got elected again, but this time, well, I should not again, because the first time he seized power, but this time he was elected, and he decided to do the right thing for his people, because he wanted to atone. I think he was like 60 by then. And then he built up, over the course of the next few years, till he was in his 80s, Spaceport 88, and thus, helped improve billions, if not trillions of lives. But then, in the Clone Wars, Dooku wanted Spaceport 88 on the CIS side. He didn't get it. But he did kill Lorian. But we were thinking that, now, this is all in the Legacy of the Jedi book, but the only part that's not covered is the construction of Spaceport 88. This is where we were thinking Lorian had a storyline there, with the construction and with the election of Lorian. So Tahlon met this man when this man said, I want to atone for what I've done. And where Tahlon was told by his master, redemption is always possible. And later, this is a belief system of his mother as well, Siri Tachi Kenobi. In the actual books, it is one of her belief systems. So the thing is, Tahlon is veering towards this very Lukean idea of redemption always being possible. By naming his son Lorian, the idea is to preserve this legacy of faith in redemption. This is where these sons, though, end up with Mace, if briefly so. I stress, briefly so. Mace decides to separate, if briefly, because having both of them in the same place, not very safe. Talanis decides to take her son, well, the younger son. She initially wants to take the other one. The other one, Qui-Gon, has begun to bond with Mace, and so Mace keeps him around for a bit. The younger son is dropped off with Ferris, because Ferris also came to check on them once he found out Tahlon had died. Ferris to the rescue again, and Talanis' second son, Lorian, is escorted away. Talanis is still recovering from childbirth, so she doesn't get much of a vote. Mace still refuses to join Ferris' temple, but now his planned strike has been screwed over because he was counting on Tahlon, but Tahlon went in. Tahlon was not very respectful and went and died. So as Tahlon's suffering from a bad case of dead, we now have Mace stuck with a kid, and now he's got to rework his plan a little. His planned coup d'etat against Palpatine. And it is, now as for Talon's corpse, we were thinking Vader gives the order to the clones, just get rid of this thing. I don't care. Throw it into an oven. The clones are the 501st Legion. The 501st Legion, if you'll recall, is composed of most of the original Jango Fett clones, and several of them do have an attachment to Tahlon. So they properly cremate him in secret and bury him and give him a proper tomb. But they do not call it Tahlon Kenobi. Instead, they name him by a clone number and by a clone nickname they gave him once. Jenny. That is to say, with a J as in as in general. Or Jenny. It was a bit of a mocking nickname of theirs, of Tahlon. And so, because the clones that are ordered to cremate him, we were thinking were, once again, Nate and Zuko, along with a few others that Tahlon once knew. And so, we kind of wanted to tie it in together to give the clones some sentimentality, where they can't resist, but they do they're still human. So that, they bury this guy they loved, and they bury him on, we're thinking Ragoon 6, where Tahlon always loved to visit, as well as Obi-Wan. It was kind of a legacy plant, an almost adoptive homeworld. So they have him buried there, on his favorite planet, in his favorite spot. But it's a deserted forest planet that no one really likes to visit. too much, except for the odd Jedi. So in this way, Tahlon is buried where nobody really goes to. And yet, it's surrounded by forest and life and whatnot. And this was Qui-Gon Jinn's favorite planet as well. So, we were thinking Tahlon, who shared so much in common with Tal and Qui-Gon, is now buried, where those two first kind of began to realize, they first bonded. Well, they used to go there as kids, as teens, as adults, and whatnot. Their love flourished there. So Tahlon, one of the fruits of that love, is buried there. And yeah, that was our plan. We were also thinking that it's about this time that our eldest brother actually had one idea, and it was a little funny. Mace, meanwhile, starts having health problems. Because while he did recover from the Force lightning, it left some... Well, okay, he basically is just suffering from a case of, cancer or something. So he's starting to have serious health problems. He's one-handed, he's starting to have some major health issues, and we were thinking it's around this time that, when Qui-Gon starts to turn around... What was it? I think... Let me check. I think it was, let me see. He was... For when Tahlon dies? Right, he's about 9 years old. So it's about 5 years later, and the trouble is, Mace by this time has moved to Terrace, into the Undercity, the lower city, in order to shake off, the trail. But he's also suffering from some health issues, and it's about this time Boba Fett is on the hunt, is on the prowl, and we were thinking Boba, for his part, is hunting down the legacy of Tahlon on Vader's orders. Bubba finds out Mace might be alive. He goes berserk because, yay! I get vengeance for Daddy! For Daddy! Great battle cry. Okay. I could not resist that. But the idea we had was Boba Fett is denied his vengeance because Mace dies due to ill health. It's just we could not imagine Mace dying we could not imagine him dying in battle. And so he basically succumbs to illness. And I know that's a little anticlimactic, but it's just impossible to imagine him dying in battle. But even as Bubba's hunting him, we figured there would be that Sith cult that Tahlon mostly butchered. Now, basically getting the idea, their survivors are going, wait, Kenobi? We really didn't like Tahlon Kenobi. He killed most of our members. So you basically have Bubba and them basically racing to get to Windu and Qui-Gon. And the thing is, Qui-Gon slips away, abandoning Mace's body because Mace pretty much, in his last moments, pretty much tells him run. And Tahlon flees down to the Undercity. And the Undercity, if people will remember from KOTOR, is really freaking dangerous. Even Boba would probably struggle down there. And Tahlon flees down there and will pretty much end up slipping away. And it's at this point he would be tracked down by the Sith cult, who would decide, you know what, we're going to turn him instead. But when they go to drag him off Terrace... Did
Terrace get bombarded? Did they rebuild it? Or did they not hit the... Oh, they did.
Yeah, it took them thousands of years, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I should have...
I love the Terrace. I love the Terrace section.
It's a good section.
I like the bounty hunters.
Yeah.
Are really cool.
I think only Manon sucked in that game.
Manon. Who's that?
You remember the water part?
Yes. That is a little... That. Yeah, it's a little bland.
Tatooine was kind of boring, too.
Yeah, at least there's a confrontation with the Sith.
Yeah.
It starts to get real.
Yeah, I like Korriban and Kashyyyk.
Korriban is awesome. Kashyyyk, yeah.
Yeah.
But the Wookiees are fun because you get to experience the Wookiee culture, their rules, great game.
We were thinking though that Qui-Gon would, however, be At this point, rescued from the Sith by a Jedi cult who sees an opportunity to, because the Sith decide to restock and refuel on, we were thinking another planet. We were thinking maybe, I think, Onderon, because we like using that world. And the Sith are then slaughtered by some Jedi cultists who decide, let's get them. There's only 3 of them, and we're like 11. We could do this. It's a few of the younger hotheads of that cult. And realizing that they hit the jackpot once they realize, wait, they had a kid who, I guess we're heroes now. So they take the kid in for a brief time and get him off planet. But we're thinking they are a cult who relocated to Duxon, if only to hide because there's a strong dark side aura on Duxon. And so they're hiding there. And Qui-Gon is thus stuck with this cult. But on top of this, now, of course, this cult has done something incredibly stupid, and the idea is Vader soon comes along because Vader's not happy. A Kenobi's been spotted, a Kenobi must die. And he quickly locates this cult. Some of this cult decides to go down fighting, but we're thinking the one who swoops into the rescue who swoops into attack is Mama Bear Talanis, who was also she had started tracking the Sith because she arrived on Terrace to try to reclaim her son, only to then realize, he got kidnapped, so she followed, and the Jedi got to Qui-Gon first and then slipped him to Duxon, and Vader, of course, gets there, just as she gets there, and this is where we're thinking she grabs her kid, gets out of there, but Vader starts giving chase, and this is where we were gonna actually have her be a little cunning, in that she gives him the slip, but proceeds to arrange for her son to be picked up by Barriss. But the thing is, the planet she decides to leave him on would be her homeworld. Basically she has him, actually we were going to have him jettisoned through escape pod onto, not her homeworld, but onto just some Outer Rim planet, even as she leads Vader to Utapau, because we wanted to tie it in with one of the Episode 3 locations. And Vader, of course, arrives. She tries to arrange a trap to try to kill Vader. Yeah, that doesn't go well. And Vader, now we were thinking she puts up a better fight than Tahlon, because she was a better fighter than him. But we were thinking buries, because she tries to use her starfighter. That doesn't go well. Vader tears it apart. And we were thinking she proves such a nuisance, he buries her under, one of those large platforms where the Utapauans lived? Buries her underneath some of that, literally tearing her in half that way. And
yikes.
Yeah, and as she lies dying, she spits on him. But Vader pretty much tells her, your husband doesn't care about you. He never cared about you. And she's confused and just tells him, no, I'll see you in hell. No, I'll see you in hell. You never...
Screw you.
Yeah, basically, screw you. You never knew him like I did. This is where Vader's like, no, because I still see his ghost. We're going to have a reveal. Vader's seemingly visited by Talon's ghost, who always seems to say, just kill this person, just do this. He's an evil, nasty thing. But the idea was, this is not Talon. It's because Vader is someone who, we got to bear in mind, hears voices in his head. He has a lot of disassociative issues. He still hears Padme's voice. He still hears Obi-Wan's voice at times, even before Obi-Wan dies. I've seen some of the comics. He's kind of cracked.
Yeah. So
we were thinking, throw in Talon, but where you have the inner darkness within Vader, kind of, the devil on the shoulder takes the shape of Talon in a way, just as the memory of Padme takes on the shape of, is kind of the angel shoulder. This way there's a counterbalance to the Padme in his head. And it makes Vader seem even crazier. And, the crazier you make Vader seem, the funner. At least that's how I think.
I was never under the impression that he was really, crazy. I mean, I know he was tormented, but the idea of voices in his head is pretty new.
Yeah, that's
but I think it's
now.
Yeah, it's interesting though. I like it because it's kind of interesting to think of someone that was really actually pretty good influence turning into someone that's like the devil on your shoulder.
But the thing is, this is Anakin's vision of Tahlon. Like, that Talon's a spiteful, jealous, envious creature. But in reality, this isn't Tahlon. And it adds the element that Vader has to demonize this person in his heart and mind. Otherwise, what did he do? It's the justification. He was always like that. He's like this. He's the sort of person who think this or say this. Because if I don't believe that about him, I murdered my best friend. We were thinking that's the kind of element. But if people don't like it, we could leave it out. I don't mind. But the idea is, Talanis basically dies.
No, I don't think leave it out. I think I would leave it in.
Okay. But Talanis dies saying, screw you. Her sons are soon reunited. But they're without a mother and a father now. They're utterly alone now. And it's at this point we're thinking, this is where we're thinking Ferris is still trying to recruit Jedi. Now, we were thinking one of them would get the idea we were thinking there'd be at least one of them who'd say we should use them as weapons. Because they are strong in the Force. They are really strong in the Force. We gotta use these kids. Ferris sees it as, actually I don't really want them dispatched into the field because it's a really bad idea. They got a target on their head. Sending them out there is stupid. And yes, we gotta train them, but in a contained environment. And one of these kids is kind of traumatized. You know what I mean? He was around for when his father died. He was around to an extent when his mother died. But he was always in the escape pod. Both of them basically giving their lives up and leading away Vader, so that they use themselves as bait, kind of like wolves. But what would this do to a child? You know what I mean? To a child who's 9 years old, the same age Anakin was when he lost his mother. And so you have one of them who's a heavily traumatized little boy. And you have, on the other hand, the other boy who is about, he'd be about 4 years younger. So he's about 5 now. And all he knows is that he never knew his dad, and his mother basically left him. So you kind of have these two little boys who they're alone. They don't, you know what I mean? They don't have a point of reference in their lives for, how to deal with this. So Ferris is kind of thinking, I can't put them out there in the field. I can't, we can train them, but we gotta keep them hidden. Yeah, but shouldn't we encourage, we were thinking one of the Jedi just gets the idea, we gotta train them, fully train them into being the next generation weapons. He doesn't know about Luke or Leia, but he's thinking, let's do what basically Ben and Yoda are thinking, except with these kids. Ferris is thinking, before we even start talking about training, because Qui-Gon started receiving some training from Mace, but before we even touch on that, we got to first try to deal with the trauma, because that's the Jedi way. We need because last time we tried taking a traumatized 9-year-old and turning him into a human weapon, it didn't go over very well. Let's try to deal with this properly this time. So this is where we were thinking these two kids are kidnapped by this Jedi. But this Jedi flees to another cult, one which we were thinking, this is where our oldest brother had a really interesting idea, where this is a Jedi cult which is giving itself a bit over to bitterness and anger. And we were thinking, they're on Nal Hutta. They're there because there's a great deal of dark swirling energy there. But they made a deal with Jabba. This is a Jedi cult which was begun by a few surviving cultists who fought in the Clone Wars. But to survive, they made a deal with Jabba. And now they don't really use their lightsabers as often. But the idea was to approach the idea of sellouts. And the idea this cultist has, because he has connections with them, is let's train Qui-Gon and Lorian. And so Qui-Gon then spends the next few years being trained by these guys. But the thing is, Qui-Gon is not someone who really takes to them. Because deep in his heart, he still remembers Ferris and whatnot. And the thing is, he didn't really grow up with his brother for a long time. So the experience of being kidnapped together and being ripped away from Ferris kind of brings the two together. And Qui-Gon does have a sense of duty of, I have to protect my younger brother. And so you have this bond that starts to grow between these two brothers. But Qui-Gon will soon be receiving Jedi training from the worst possible people. Jedi who have lost their... they've frayed from the light. And they have strayed from it and towards the darkness. But Qui-Gon doesn't initially realize it. And they're wanting to turn him into kind of the perfect weapon against Vader. Even as they take on bounties and whatnot. And the thing is, that you can imagine what kind of environment this is what kind of effect this environment will have on Qui-Gon. But we were thinking that, of course, around the age of 13, no wait, I think it was 12. Yeah, it was 13. 13 overhears, because the thing is, because of his particular background, Qui-Gon never learned to really trust all that well. And although he has been receiving training from these people, they did kidnap him. So he kind of, starts to learn their techniques of hiding and whatnot, because they do teach him to hide and stealth and whatnot, because why not teach him those tricks? He does not fully realize it, but they are trying to lure him to the dark side. He overhears their plans for him and for Kid Brother, and the two slip over out of the temple at the first opportunity over to the hangar where they trust someone. They get on a ship. The guy goes to sell them into slavery, because why not? So they end up trying to escape, only to end up on the neighboring planet in Tatooine. And it's then that that Qui-Gon gets the brilliant idea, since, they slipped off the ship into an escape pod and crash onto planet, cross Dune Sea. And the two very nearly die when they are found having narrowly evaded some Tuskens, which obviously would have easily made short work of them. They are found by Ben Kenobi. And so the circle is kind of come around, and Ben now meets his grandsons. And they don't realize he's grandpa initially. And so the 13-year-old Qui-Gon and he'd be probably 9-year-old Lorian, are taken in by Ben. Briefly so. Well, at least that's Ben's intention. And this is where we're gonna... I think we should leave off.
Yeah, that's a good cliffhanger there.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know if you have any questions or comments.
I like the ending. I like this reunion. I wasn't expecting it. Yeah, I like that I think the Dark Jedi cult is fun to explore. And how they're kind of...
They swore
their straying to the dark side. I mean, you call them a Jedi cult or a Sith cult?
I said they're started off as a Jedi cult, but they've become a Dark Jedi cult. They swore to be... they swore they would destroy Vader, but then they made a deal with Jabba. They made one concession. And then Jabba said, well, I want you to do bounty hunting for me if I'm going to tolerate your existence. Okay. So they make one concession until eventually they're just of the dark side. What do you think of that idea? Of how, You have an entire...
Yeah, I think that they should, they're, like, I could see, like, an image in my head of them kind of starting out as sort of valiant, like rogue knights, and then over time, like medieval rogue knights, and then over time, like, you can kind of see them visually becoming a little more decrepit, a little bit more gangly. Dark. Yeah, dark.
Yeah, that was the idea our eldest brother had, because he designed a lot of things around Qui-Gon. The death of Tahlon was Dan and my idea. The Qui-Gon till, like, all the adventures of Qui-Gon Kenobi until he's of age and whatnot is purely our eldest brother. So, yeah. And the idea was always reunite them with Ben. But for a long series of twists and turns and misadventures... But their story is tied in with Ferris Olin because we really like Ferris Olin. He's been a family favorite of ours because we really liked his novels. Around the time our father first fell sick from around 2007 to 2008, and then he passed away in 2008, we were reading a lot of the Ferris Olin novels. So there's a lot of emotional attachment on our part to Ferris. So a lot of the Talon Dark Time stuff was crafted with the idea that we have to keep Ferris's cult together, because we love the idea of Ferris having his Jedi cult, which is the seeds for the future Jedi Order that Luke would help rebuild. But the thing is, we kind of had the notion we wanted Ferris to remain glorious and Ferris. We didn't want him going into the shadows like he did in the canon. That's the only point of interest we really wanted to alter completely. But we're just massive mega Ferris Olin fanboys. But the idea was always to separate the Kenobis from him. So that Ferris is kind of he's kind of worried sick. He's basically a godfather, and he's like, my godson's basically disappeared. Where the hell are they? Because he went off on a mission. And he comes back home, and he finds the kids are missing, and the guy he was arguing with gone, and he's like, oh, crap. And he doesn't know where the guy went. Of course, he's going to hear from Ben, with Ben telling him, yeah, they're with me. So that Ferris is basically going to be like, it's been a few years, and okay, they're alive? Good. So, yeah.
That'd be pretty nuts for him. I had a couple of notes.
Okay.
So what, do you have time, or do you guys got to jump?
Yeah, no. I was just worrying over, I hope none of this was too stupid.
No, it's definitely not too stupid. I think it's great. So with the clones, is this around, one thing that starts happening around this time is the clones start getting phased out. So is that happening at this point yet? Or the only thing is like,
well,
would that help with the fact that they are getting phased out? And I think Palpatine and I think Grand Moff Tarkin, and maybe this was you that put this idea in my head, or like I read it elsewhere, is that those two they didn't like the clones, but is it sort of like, yeah, we can disregard them, we don't really care what they're doing.
They did like
but we don't like them.
They did like the clones to an extent. But around 10 years, I think it is, 8 or 10 years after Episode 3, you have... No, I think it was 8 years after Episode 3. Dan just nodded his head. He knows that part of the timeline. Okay, so 8 years after Episode 3, you have a rebellion on Kamino where they use Jango Fett clones. And after that, this soured the Jango Fett clones for, like, in Palpatine and Tarkin's eyes and whatnot. So what happened was that Palpatine wanted to just phase them out. And what happened is that all the Jango Fett clone legions that were still around, which is basically all of them, were combined into the 501st Legion. You just have one mega legion under Vader. Now, a lot of those guys were put on the Death Star duty. A lot of others were left on Vajun, Vader's throne world. And the thing is, Vader would use the remaining Jango Fett clones as his Vader's fist. At least that's to my understanding how it works. If I'm wrong, either way, this is all I know is he has a lot more Jango Fett clones than everyone else. Most of the Jango Fett clones, though, that were not with Vader were on the Death Star. They were assigned to Death Star duty. That's stated in Battlefront 2. Most of them are on Death Star. And most of them die when Luke destroys the Death Star.
Okay.
But there's still about, I think it's a third of them, which I think would be like a billion of them, survive in afterwards. But the Jango Fett clones, we do know from a few Boba Fett novels and whatnot, that they're hunted down like cattle. Basically, there is a kind of hunt for them during the New Republic period. Like, all right, we got to hunt them down and kill them because these are the elite crack troopers of the Empire. We want to get rid of them all. So there's a hunt put on them. So they get treated like the Jedi do in the aftermath of the fall of the Empire, at least to my understanding. And this is one of the tragedies of the rebellion taking power. The clones are innocent, really, and, they get the same treatment as the Jedi. And this is an injustice we kind of felt should have been addressed, but it's never really properly addressed in the continuity. So we're kind of planting the seeds for it to be addressed, beyond just Battlefront 2 and the odd comic or Boba Fett novel here and there. Mostly the Boba Fett, I think, novels from the sequel era deal with this stuff. But by then it's like it's been so long in universe. But the Jango Fett clones are set aside, like I said, under Tarkin and Vader's authority, and you have a new batch of clones that are made. The new generation of clones are not up to snuff. They're not as physically fit. They're not as good looking, I guess. They don't have personality like the Jango Fett clones do. Actually, the Jango Fett clones have a lot of personality, whereas the new generation ones don't. They're basically soulless husks that just go out and hunt and kill for the Empire. Palpatine likes them a lot better. Vader likes the Jango Fett clones because they can think, they can strategize, they can retaliate, and they have battle experience. And the clones, we got to bear in mind, by the time of probably episode 4, they're trained Jedi killers. These guys could kill Luke Skywalker like this, probably in some cases. Or at least a lot of them could. Not all of them, but a lot of these guys, I don't mean peak Luke. Peak Luke Skywalker, which would probably be Luke by the time of Jedi Academy, could curb stomp first, and we know he does. So, we know he does in the Imperial period at one point. So, it's just Luke in episode 5, I would argue, they could probably curb stomp. These guys are trained troopers who, I would argue, you pit a few of them against Darth Maul, they're going to kill Darth Maul. You put them against a lot of Jedi or Sith, they could slaughter them. So Vader sees the value of these guys. Palpatine doesn't. Why do you want a trooper with a soul? Because the clones do have a conscience. The problem they have is they're not regarded as trustworthy because of that one Camino rebellion.
Right. And they can't get the Jango Fett. Or I don't know, maybe they had vats.
Well,
large
the Jango
stores
Fett
of
DNA
it, but
was
they can't get.
By Boba
Yeah.
Fett.
Okay, so they can't get access to the original DNA.
No, because Boba destroyed it on the orders of the Empire.
Yeah, so that's a big problem then.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question was, so I think this redemption thing is I'm kind of starting to, I don't know, I'm like, who's gonna start saying that? Who would be the one to say Vader? We can't redeem him. I think that it's obviously it worked out with Luke, but I could see. I'm just part of me is man, where do you draw the line with someone that's done all these bad things? Where do you draw the line? Do you think that there's a point to that, or is it just only Luke could do it? Or because I when you hear about Tahlon, he was conflicted, and in my opinion, as soon as you're conflicted when you're fighting Vader, it's pretty much over.
Yep. That's
but
why he can never win.
Yeah, you can't defeat him.
Well,
unless you're really
hyper focused.
Yeah, exactly. And even then, it's still going to be hard.
Yeah. I will be honest. I don't know if Tahlon could have beaten him if Tahlon was focused and determined. I don't know. But I think the fact that he was divided is what did him in. But the thing with redemption here is that the idea was Tahlon loved him too much to let him go. There was that sworn brother element from from French, German, Scottish, and Asian history. It's sworn brothers in a lot of literature is very important, and this is what they are. And because Ferris is basically the eldest son of Celia and Obi-Wan, Anakin's the middle child, Talon's the youngest. So this is youngest brother with middle brother. He can't do it. But
Yeah.
I don't think Tahlon could redeem Vader. Vader didn't want to be redeemed at that point. But I think...
And my other question is, do you think the redemption thing, is that a Jedi thing more so, or do you think that's more of a, like, that was a Luke thing and it's a Tahlon thing, and it's a very personal?
I think it is a Jedi thing, but I also think it's a personal thing. Like, because we got to bear in mind, Revan sought to redeem Bastila, but also sought to redeem Euthura, Ban, who Revan didn't really know Euthura. On the other hand, the Jedi Exile sought to redeem Kreia. Like, we got to bear in mind, redemption is a powerful force in Star Wars. It's a theme that crops up again and again and again throughout the mythology. So I would argue that, okay, well, I'm Christian, so I view this as a very Christian theme. Redemption, the power of it, is just cropping up over and over again in the story of Star Wars. And at least my favorite story of redemption is probably that of St. Paul, who starts off as a murderer, but becomes, I don't know if you know the story of Damascus, but he gets a vision and then realizes what he's done and vows to atone for what he's done after he's cured of his blindness, induced by the vision. And he then goes off to become the messenger of God and to never kill again. And very beautiful story. But this sort of redemption is very common in Star Wars. It crops up and again and again and again. And I think one has to keep it in there in Star Wars. It's baked in the bread. And I think Luke was the only one who could redeem Vader by the time of Episode 6. I would argue, though, there were steps on the road. Tao, the one child apprentice of Vader from a manga, who is in and out of canon constantly. Like, some people will say he's non-canon, some people will say he is. Some creatives will say he is, then we're going to get told, no, those references don't count. We regard him as canon, but to a point. Tao is a child that Vader takes in with the goal of turning to the dark side. And he beats him, he humiliates him. But Tao dies for Vader. But he's a child. And he dies in Vader's arms, pretty much almost begging to be loved. But he dies in a similar... Like, the position, at least I saw of the one of manga image, reminded me of Shmi and Anakin. So Vader's kind of traumatized by this. And Vader encounters Tao and loses him before he ever meets Luke. So that Tao broke down a lot of those emotional and spiritual defenses. Because before that, I don't think Luke could have redeemed him. But it's after Vader loses what is essentially his firstborn child, in a way. Like, the child he did raise. That Vader starts to hit... He gets into a midlife crisis of sorts. He just loses faith. He gets tired because he's been doing this for so long. And then you have Episode 4 where the Senate is dissolved and all central government disappears. You now have a feuding, warring state. It's a feudal period. And everybody's out to carve out their own territory. So Vader now has to start the entire process of reunifying the galaxy again. This is the biggest FU Palpatine ever did to him. And along with killing Tao, because Tao is executed on Palpatine's orders. So Vader has lost his son to Palpatine. He's now lost his life's work, his career to Palpatine. So I think by the time Luke rolls in, Vader's just exhausted. And he's looking for something. He's looking for hope or something. Like something to give him a reason to keep getting up in the morning. And Luke, for his part, sees the good in Vader. And there is good. So I think it's a series of factors and individuals.
Yeah, I do too. I think I agree with you. I don't disagree with you. I think I'm just trying to understand like why I think this way. But I think I'm also reading Heir to the Empire right now.
Okay.
And Luke, I mean, we've seen Luke and we've seen Jedi kill many, many people. Like it's a part of the battle. Like it's part of war. It's part of battle. And I'm like, sometimes I'm like, there's a confrontation early in the story where there's clearly a group of aliens that are trying to go in and kill him, like very obviously, but he's looking for any way possible not to have to kill them. But he's like, I guess I just have to.
That's Obi-Wan of him.
Yeah. Okay.
I would argue Luke One thing I never liked about a lot of games is that they portray Luke as using Form 4, Ataru. I always felt that Luke should be... Okay, this is one piece of canon I want to change. I feel Luke should be Form 3, Saresu like Obi-Wan. It just suits him. He's so peaceful. He's so kind. He seems more like the type who'd rather weaken his enemy and then disarm them. That's the Saresu way. It just fits better with his philosophy. But, I don't know. I'm a fanboy, so I like Luke. I think Form 3 would make him so much cooler. Because now he fights like Obi-Wan. And let's bear in mind, Obi-Wan is kind of his grandpa. Luke is very close to Dad, but he's Grandpa's boy. We all know that. You have Mama's boy, you've got Daddy's boy, you've got Grandma's boy. He's Grandpa's boy. He always was. So I think it brings him and Obi-Wan closer together. I like that idea.
Yeah. No, it's when that happened in the book, it's true to the character, right? That's how Luke is.
Always will be.
Yeah. But sometimes I'm just like, look, we know what's going to happen here, Luke. We know you're going to have to do this, so let's not, I don't know, let's not agonize over it. People are trying to kill you. You have to rescue your friends. You're just, you have to make quick decisions.
Yeah.
But that's the character, and you have to put that in there because Luke is not, he doesn't want to kill people for no reason. He wants to avoid it, so
but this is
you do have to put that in there.
This is why him and Kyle Katarn make the perfect team.
See, that's what, maybe I need to read more Kyle Katarn. It's I don't want just someone who just ruthless for ruthless sake, but I would just say it's clear that in battle and in a lot of these situations, Jedi do take lives and they do it without hesitation. It's not for pleasure, but
Kyle is someone who starts off ruthless as a angry mercenary type for gun for hire for Mothma, and he basically becomes the Vader of the rebellion. But then Kyle, starts to turn away. He starts to get redeemed. Luke does a lot to redeem him, but the two develop a relationship like big brother, little brother. Sometimes Kyle's the big brother, sometimes Luke is. Other times it's the other way around. In terms of force power and strength, Kyle's way more powerful than Luke. Kyle could curb stomp Luke like that. And that's canon. But, and we know that because Dasan, Luke's first apprentice, beat Luke, escaped, and then Kyle later killed Dasan in a one-on-one duel. Luke could never defeat Dasan. But Luke decided to help Kyle out, knowing that Kyle could defeat Dasan. So, and because it's his friend, because he wants to help people. But the thing is, what's so fascinating is that Kyle complains in some appearances about Luke holding him back, but other times complains, stop trying to help the enemy. But then, by the time of Jedi Academy, Kyle starts to mellow out and realize, him and Luke operate as a great team. Luke is often like, come on, we gotta give everyone a chance. Then you have Kyle, on the other hand, who's like, well, yeah, but if they pull a blaster on me, I'm gonna pull my lightsaber out. And tell them, you really want to do that? So Kyle is very peaceful eventually, but he's still, he's rough around the edges. He's Han Solo with a lightsaber. And so you just have this, this bond between the two. Kyle operates a lot like Goliath from Gargoyles, while Luke operates like Obi-Wan. So they're a perfect duo. The only problem is Kyle's a snarker who's sarcastic all the time. And Luke, this is something I love about Jedi Outcast, real quick. This is on a mission that is freaking hard, and I hated the mission, but I love the one cinematic cutscene, because it was my reward. You have Dasan who sneaks up on Luke and starts to beat him all over the pavement. Luke then, escapes, and Dasan is frustrated and has to leave aboard a ship. And you just have Kyle who says, what happened to keeping a low profile? And you have Luke, I know, okay? He suddenly appeared on top of me. Oh yeah, suddenly appeared on top of you. How is it that I can't get away with that sort of excuse and you can? You have Luke, shut up, Kyle. Now tell me, Kyle, where are you? You have Kyle looking around. Tell me you're not on the capital ship that just took off. Alright, I won't tell you. You're on the ship? Yeah. Can you look around? Can you find a way out? It's in space, Luke. What do you want me to do? Go out there? Like, they basically bicker until the stormtroopers come in and have Kyle. All right, I'm going to have to talk to you later. And has to fight his way out. While Luke's going, no, don't you hang up on me. And, the two of them really tend to... They tend to spar with each other verbally. Like, I really like how they do that. It's like Obi-Wan and Anakin on steroids. It's even funnier. I really love Kyle and Luke. They're my favorite OT in sequel era characters. You ask me to decide between them. I can't. I just cannot decide between these two.
I won't make you pick. It's okay.
Oh, thank heavens.
I think I have one last note, and then maybe we can wrap up. One thing that struck me about the, I think Qui-Gon, they wanted to use the Dark Jedi cult. They wanted to use him as a weapon, right? I thought that was interesting. I was just like, why does this feel like it won't work? Why is that not going to work? I tried to figure it out before you were telling me the answer.
Yeah. It's like,
and I was like, why is this not going to work? We know it's not going to work. Everyone that would read it would know it's not going to work, right? Because it's like not a noble goal to have.
And even a child will figure out, you kidnapped me from my godfather.
But part of me was like, what could make it work? Is it almost an even better question? Like, if we could imagine what could make it work. But I didn't think think that cult would be equipped, because you really can't have that goal be too obvious if that is actually what you want. Like, let's pretend that we're being evil, right? Like, if we were very conniving and very clever, we would be more like Sidious, right? Like, I help you achieve your goals. Look how bad these people are over here.
I gave you birthday cake.
I gave you birthday cake. No one else gave you birthday cake. I feed you. I give you, we took you in. We fed you. We clothed you. Look you know what I mean? Like, that's what they would have to do and manipulate that person very well. But I felt like the Sith cult that you brought in, they were like, oh, this is going to be easy mode. We got this really powerful kid. We're just going to use him, make it our weapon. And I was like, you're not smart enough to do that. You're not clever enough. Yeah, which is kind of fun, like, to see them mess up.
Yeah, it's because our oldest brother was like, these are the guys who Jedi cult who survived Order 66 through dumb luck. They somehow regrouped and then they got completely outsmarted by Jabba the Hutt and got conned by him into basically becoming his flunkies. These guys are not bright enough to keep this kid.
Yeah, because he's Jabba smart, and he can't be, Jedi mind tricks wouldn't work on him.
And we're like, he ended up describing it as a bunch of Jedi who turned gangster, thought they could outsmart Jabba, but really they're too stupid to realize that Jabba completely conned them. And he said they're stupid enough to have let Jabba the Hutt turn them to the dark side. It was not some great Sith Lord or some manipulative Darksider. It was not some brilliant strategist or like Dark Jedi like Desan or Jarek or Vader or Palpatine. It was just Jabba the Hutt. Like, you let a Hutt convince you into turning one step at a time. You're not bright enough to keep this kid. And
yeah,
his idea was, however, the child is not capable of escaping for a few years because he doesn't have the skills. But the problem is these guys are teaching him their skills, which is even dumber. And the idea was, these guys, the only reason they've not been hunted down by Vader is because why would he bother? They're not a threat to him. They're actually turning, and they're doing Jabba's dirty work. They're helping keep the streets clean, basically, by being Jabba's flunkies. And Jabba is basically a feudal vassal of sorts of Vader. So they're not smart enough to realize it, but they're Vader's flunkies. So, but the only thing is, they've got in mind, like, they don't tell Vader or Jabba or anyone that they have Kenobi. They are smart enough to realize they can't really talk to anyone about it, but they just get the dumb idea, well, we could do this. We could pull it off. They don't. They can't. So that's where we thought it would be a little, like, there's a little comedy in there.
Yeah, no, I think that's what it needs to be. Like, it needs to be kind of silly and fun.
Yeah.
Oh, I had one more thing, and then Just one more thing is that I haven't seen a lot of non-Jedi like characters / like archetypes, which that's not a bad thing necessarily. It's just an observation. Like I love the smuggler, like rogue archetype. I feel like you guys would be able to write a good character of that like variety.
Yeah.
Is it more because we want to be more? I mean, this is a Jedi-centric story, so it seems like it's Jedi and then mostly clones.
Well,
Jedi are Force sensitives and then clones.
The funny thing is, we actually had in mind next time to get into the stories of the Stardust Twins and of Viera Feld. And ironically, we're going to be going more space pirate and bounty hunter and smuggler stuff with them. So, ironically, you happen upon the very thing we were very excited about to approach those characters with. Because when we were designing their stories, we didn't want Jedi stuff. Well, they will eventually... Okay, spoiler. They do eventually go Jedi, but we want there to be like a good solid decade in universe almost, where it's just pirating, smuggling, bounty hunting.
It's the journey towards Jedihood.
Yeah, but this is so much funner to have them just be... like, approach that rogue life, like you called it, Chris. So yeah, we are in love with that aspect of Star Wars as well. It's just Qui-Gon... he's kind of skirting the edge. Lorian never really does. And yeah, so this has been Jedi-centric so far, but we're about to veer into the pirating, smuggling stuff. My gosh, Viera basically does piracy, mercenary work, smuggling, bounty hunting, everything.
Any kind of gig, any kind of work they can get.
Yeah. That's exactly the idea. And yeah, but for that, I think that would be an almost entire part. Because the thing is, we couldn't just jump into that stuff with those other characters. It's because we had to... They start going out there when they're teenagers. So, like, they're not going around doing anything while they're kids. I don't know what you think of that. It's just, I don't see it being realistic. If they're going around...
It's fine. Not everything has to start at childhood.
Yeah. It's just Qui-Gon, and his life is meant to be shaky and kind of broken until his adolescence, when he starts to try to take a bit more control over his destiny. He doesn't really succeed, but he tries. So yeah.
Okay.
That's about it.
Yeah, I think that'll wrap it up for today's part. So that was part 4. And yeah, this has been really fun. You guys have a lot written, and I'm glad that we're able to talk about it on the pod. So we'll definitely come back with more episodes of the Kenobi Timeline. But until then, hope everyone, you have a good rest of your week, and may the Force be with you.
And may the Schwartz be with you all.
Bye.